Welcome back to Rolling Solo. My name is Adam Smith, and in this featured product video, we are going to be checking out a full box storage solution for Lord of the Rings, the LCG, the living card game from Fantasy Flight Games. Now, this box was designed by Fancy But Functional. Now, this is an individual that puts a lot of effort and time into putting together storage solutions that are not only helpful in terms of organizing your game components and getting them all into one space, but also being able to hold and just store an insane amount of content for some of these larger games. Lord of the Rings, the LCG has a ton of content. So much content, in fact, that it actually was overwhelming one slot on my Kallax and leading into another and even another after that, just based on the number of expansion boxes and just everything that's been released to date for this thing really starts to add up. I wanted a solution that was going to fit on a Kallax shelf, as that's what I primarily use to store my games. And the great thing about Fancy But Functional is that they make these storage box solutions literally fit exactly into a Kallax size shelf. So you can get everything that you have for the game into one location. Now, the only thing I will mention here is literally everything released to date for the LCG is in this box except for the Nightmare decks. Those are the only ones that are not part of this box, and I'm storing them separately in their own box. But in terms of the rest of the content, which is the majority of what people have gone after, that all sits inside. I've gone ahead and put the handles into the box as well as closed the clasps on the very top of the box. Now, don't worry when you're carrying this thing, and of course when you have all those cards in there, this thing is going to weigh a lot. When you actually slide it into your Kallax shelf, you'll easily be able to fold down the handles like so in order to slide it into your Kallax. It has room for everything that this storage box has to offer. There's a handle in the front and the back, and you're simply lifting straight up and straight down, and they're really secure in terms of the locking mechanism to make sure that it can handle the weight. So one of the things I want to talk about in terms of the exterior of the box now, seeing as that's what you're primarily seeing here, is of course at the very bottom of the box you have staining here of the Fellowship, and there is the option to choose from multiple different color stains. You can go with black, you can go with walnut, and there's others beyond that, and some of them pertain to certain boxes and aren't available on others, but you can find it on the web store as to what's available. For me personally, the walnut look really made the most sense here for Lord of the Rings, just personally because it just fits the theme that much better, and so I just like it. It also contrasts really nicely with the wood staining in terms of the color of the wood coming through and almost the gold presence on the ring indentation that's going around the Lord of the Rings logo in the center there. Again, you also have some famous daggers and swords. These are actually used as the joints of the box itself, and you're going to see how that works in a second. Another nice design touch that makes the whole front face of this box really pop. Now, I will mention that the sides are also stained. Really everything on the box is stained when you go with that option. On the very back side of the box that you can't see in this shot, these types of daggers and swords are not used on the back side where nobody can see it. There's just regular wood pieces there for the hinges. They still do the exact same job. They still have the exact same screws going on, but they don't look as good on this side of the box. And that's just, again, because no one's going to see anything on the opposite side, of course, when it's stored anyway. So that side is stained all the way around. It has some nice wooden joints, but this front face is really where you're showing off how nice this storage solution is. Now, something else I want to mention is something I gave as feedback back to Fancy But Functional when I put this thing together, was that I found that if you actually go ahead and install the joints with these screws, but you don't use washers behind the screws themselves, Then one problem you could potentially run into is that over time, as you open and close the box, which you'll see how that opens in a second, there could be wear and tear as the swords actually glide across the front face of the blocks, and because of that, it could actually leave some marks. So by putting some washers to ensure that there's some clearance there, plus it just smoothly moves in transitions, it's a lot better of a solution, and the creator of this particular box agreed with me. So going forward, if you're going to pick one up, definitely ask for those, and I believe those can be included, no problem. In worst case, you can go pick up some washers pretty cheap from your local hardware store. So here's a closer up look at this box, just so you can see the type of wood engravings that are going on here. But now I want to open this thing up and show you what it looks like on the inside and how I've gone ahead and organized everything. The first step in opening up this box is quite easy. You're just going to go ahead and unlatch these clasps at the very top, freeing the top to be able to move and separate. Then you're going to kind of shift the box back just a little bit, enough that you can start to remove the front handles right off, and you'll do the exact same for the back side as well. And once these are out of the picture, you now are able to start pulling this thing apart. How you're going to do that is you're going to take your hand and you're going to put your thumb here in the center, the rest of your hand will sit on the back, and you're going to grab it, and then you're going to basically glide it out, and it is going to extend out like so. You'll do the exact same for the opposite side, and now we can go ahead and just open up the top trays as well to reveal what's inside. Here's a look at the box completely wide open. At this point, again, you notice that the hinges on the front of the box ensure that there's full movement of those top portions, but also keeping things together and secured so nothing was to fall left or right. What I really like about this box is you could literally carry your collection anywhere, bring it anywhere with you, and then literally gain access to any of the cards in your collection at any point in time without having to thumb through a number of different boxes. And that was one of my major problems with prior storage solutions, was having to go through 3, 4, 5, 6 different boxes just to get to the cards that I'm trying to get access to in order to deck build for this game. Whereas in this situation, with things organized the way they are, I've got things by different expansions, I've got the cycle that applies to that expansion, and not only are they all in order, but on top of it, inside of each of the trays, as you'll see when I do some close-up shots in a moment, there are individual containers in each row that you can then slot your expansions into, and if you're only trying to access that expansion, you just pull that one out and nothing else. So just taking a closer look at the hinges and how they operate, I really do like it quite a bit, and it's really cool that the actual swords themselves are really keeping the box secure, and that each tier essentially rests on the tier above that as well. It's a really cool design choice. I just love it overall, and it also just looks absolutely epic when you open this thing up on the table. So now that we've talked enough about the exterior of the box, let's start talking about how this box operates on the inside and how it organizes things. Now this top tier section here on the left, which you're seeing in this shot, there's the one on the right as well, is free of any kind of restrictions above it in terms of gaining access to cards. Might be worth mentioning that just simply from the standpoint of you determining which cards should go into which compartment. There's nothing here preventing you from getting access to these cards, whereas down in the second tier, as you can see, this particular shelf sits half over this shelf, so you're going to need to do a couple adjustments to the actual box to get access to those cards more easily. I'll show you that in a little bit. Now the first thing I'm going to do is just take out this token tray. These tokens are not in the base game. These tokens are from another Etsy creator, not part of Fancy But Functional. I'll talk about that a little later on, but these tokens are absolutely awesome. And again, this actual organizer though, this piece that houses tokens, does come from Fancy But Functional and works with, as you can see, with third-party tokens, as well as, of course, the actual tokens that come inside of the board game itself, those cardboard ones. So we're going to go ahead and remove everything from the tray here. Now, what you can't see 100% is there's a long tray that goes along here, and you can store whatever you want inside of it. I've just got those tokens in there and some other cardboard tokens, but you could literally put anything from the game you want in that section. Now, there are two ways to gain access to this top tier section. The first way is to simply just go ahead, reach inside of the middle tier and pull it straight up. If you pull this straight up, you then gain access to both of these, as they're free of anything on the ends that might stop them from being pulled up directly. So quick access to everything in here. And again, I really like the fact that you can literally pull these things out in its own tray. Again, that comes as part of the insert, and organize things by expansions. You can just grab the one that you're actually currently ripping through and not have to deal with a whole folder of cards that you have to thumb through. On top of it, having these extremely handy dividers are really going to make searching through everything that much easier. All right, so I've gone ahead and placed everything back into the top tier because I want to show you what you have to do in order to get access to the different organizers of cards down below here, but it's easier to show this example up top where you guys can see it a bit better. So this is another way to access the cards, and it has you taking the bottom out of the trays that sit right next to the cards. And how you do this is you simply put your hand underneath the tray and your thumb inside the tray, and you're just going to basically push along. It's going to slide out. You need to kind of like remove a little bit on each side. It's really easy. It's just like small touches here and there, and then you're just gliding it out like so. The whole bottom of that tray is now empty for the storage portion of it over here. My hand can go straight through. Now, the reason that's useful is because now you can go ahead and grab these trays and you can just pull them out more freely without having to deal with the whole storage solution on the side. Why this matters a lot for the second tier is there's no way you're getting these trays out of here unless you do exactly what I just showed you, because you need to shuffle them over in order to pull them straight up. So down below, I've gone ahead and removed the bottom, as you saw me do it up here. Did the exact same thing for the second tier. And now I'm going to show you that this is how you need to gain access to these trays. You'll slide them all the way to the end like so. And then you'll just go for the loopholes at the very end of the tray, and you're going to lift up. So you're going to pick this box straight up. And the one thing you will notice is a difference. You're going to kind of turn it on an angle to pull it out, is that these trays are larger in terms of the size or length of them than the ones up top. The ones up top are divided into 3 small trays. The ones on the second tier level here are 2 larger trays, and then the same design here on the second tier follows down to the base of this insert or organizer, where there's 6 more trays. So here's a shot of the center of the box. For my organization purposes, I chose to have my player cards down in this area because it's just easier to gain access to them. Now, in order to gain access to the organizers on the left and right hand side, again, because there is something half over them, you need to remove one of these trays and then slide it over and pick it up. So that's really the only con of this entire organization setup, is just needing to knock out a piece in order to gain access to certain other pieces. But again, when you're putting all your cards in, that hopefully this video will help with this, you can make some good choices as to where some of these organizers of cards go, so that you don't need to go through that necessary movement of anything. For instance, if you're really into the deck building portion of this game, which many people that play this game are, you might want to have your player cards dead center so that you can quickly open the box, grab it straight from the middle, and start your deck building exercise, and then jump into scenarios after that, right? It's just a choice in terms of how you want to lay things out. So as you can clearly see, these dividers work wonders for you to be able to find not only the expansion you're playing with, but also the individual scenarios you're working through as you're opening up packs and really building upon the collection of cards and your pools available to you as you deck build and enjoy the game further. So I highly recommend going after some dividers. Now, whether you go my route, which was to find an individual on Etsy that isn't related to this particular product, Fancy But Functional organizer here, and got some dividers that way, that is one option. Or you could, as I mentioned earlier in the video, if you really like the look of the wood going on in this box, you want to keep that going, you can pick up engraved dividers straight from Fancy But Functional as well. You can also decide not to get engraved dividers and just go with standard dividers that don't have any markings on it whatsoever. And then if you want to be creative, you can go ahead and stain it how you want to or whatever. So you do have options available to you. For me personally, I found having these printed, just based on how colorful they are, they really help this box just come alive and make it so much easier to find things. So for example here, I've gone ahead and pulled out one of the card inserts. I want to talk about the dividers a little bit more, just around the fact that these are very flexible in terms of having multiple slits along the side here that I'm not making use of, because again, I went ahead and picked up something on Etsy that does the job in a way that I like a little better. But if you want to go with fancy but functional options on dividers, every one of these are going to have little slots that you can ensure you can place dividers exactly where you want them to go. I also found that assembling this thing, even though it looks quite monstrous, was actually quite easy. And what I used in order to make life easier for me was I used a super glue that was an ultra gel control, because I found that when actually placing the super glue on the product, I really wanted to make sure that it stayed where I put it, so that when I actually pressed two things together, they actually did in fact glue. I didn't want runny super glue, in other words, and have to deal with the potential of me gluing my fingers together and sticking things all over the place. It would have just made things a nightmare. So high recommendation for going after some kind of like ultra gel super glue, where you can actually control the applicator to ensure the super glue goes exactly where you want it to go. And then of course it just ensures that the glue doesn't leak out beyond the cracks you're gluing to make it just look ugly in the end. By the end of this, I didn't have any issues with that at all. Every single adhesion for the wood all fit perfectly, and they can all handle the weight. And I can tell you right now, this thing weighs a ton. So now that we talked about the exterior of the box and the interior in terms of how things are moved around or to gain access to different aspects of the box, let's talk about how I've got things stored. Now, this is just how I have things stored, and I'm probably going to even change this in the future. So don't take this as the way, because every person's use case for this storage solution could be very different depending on a number of factors. And we'll probably touch on a few of those as I talk through things here. So first off, we got the base game of Lord of the Rings LCG for me up top here, and I run through expansions and the cycle packs in order as they were released, starting on this side, running all the way through, then down to this level all the way through, then over here all the way through, and over here all the way through. So that's going to cover all the deluxe expansions. Nothing to do with the saga, nothing to do with the major movies or the Hobbit. All that campaign type stuff is down here in the center. So I've kind of kept things broken up that way. Plus I've got the player cards in their own separate section, and I still have an empty tray there in the back. So you're likely wondering, okay, so that's all fine and dandy. I mean, you can store your cards however you want, but what if you're a sleever versus an individual who doesn't sleeve? Well, if you're like me and you didn't actually sleeve your entire collection, then you're golden. This solution is going to work for you, because you're going to be able to get all the cards into this box, especially if you store it like I do with a side box that actually houses the decks you've pre-constructed and are using in your scenarios, plus a handful of the scenarios you're actually planning to play and are playing in here. This allows me to just grab one small box whenever I actually want to play the game without having to lug this gigantic storage box off the Kallax shelf and then go through it. The only thing that could make my life even easier is if I had another storage box, or I just put the player cards that are right here into this box. Then I would be revisiting this Kallax box even less, because at that point I'd just be coming in here strictly for new content, new scenarios to play. Because if I want a deck build, everything would be outside of the box. You're probably going to want to have a bite-sized storage solution to pick up when you actually want to play the game, because if you're like me, your table might be in front of your Kallax, so you can easily drop this gigantic beast right on the table and open it up, and it's not a big issue. But everyone's use case could be different. What if you're climbing a set of stairs to your game table every single time? Or what if you need to move from one room to the next and you need to lug this box? It's not light. It is not light at all, and it's going to be a decent weight. And probably after you do it a couple times, you're going to go, I really need to not do this anymore. It's kind of annoying. It's almost like dragging the trove chest for Too Many Bones across your house every single time you try to play it. It becomes extremely heavy, and you really just want to go back to it only when you have to. Now, granted, I use the Too Many Bones comparison, and there is a difference there in the box designs, because Too Many Bones, the trove chest, you can actually open up the lid from the front and pull individual trays out, but you're still accessing some pretty decently heavy trays, especially if you have everything for the game regardless. And the funny thing is, the majority of us that have been playing this game since the very beginning, or even years ago, whenever it was that you dove into this particular LCG, you likely already have a ton of deck boxes, a ton of storage solutions that you've already tried to piece together to try to keep this thing organized. So if you're watching this video to this point, you probably are already thinking that this could be the right solution for you. And that's really the aim of the video, is to try to help you make an informed decision as to whether this particular solution could make life easier for you in the future. And for me personally, based on the usage I've gotten out of it already, it absolutely is. As I mentioned before, I had 2 full Kallax shelves slots completely filled with expansion boxes, core boxes, all kinds of additional special edition stuff, like just way too much stuff. And getting it all down into one Kallax slot was a huge win. And then on top of it, having it actually look as good as it does and design-wise be as accessible as it is, I'm really happy. For those individuals that are interested in the dividers and really liked what you saw in terms of the ones I picked up from Etsy, this is the store you want to go visit. I'm going to have a link to the store in the video description and pinned comment for you. Now, if you're curious as to where I got these token upgrades from, these I got many, many years ago from Draculas Tokens on Etsy. Again, I'll have a link to that store in the video description and pinned comment as well. I am a huge fan of these tokens. They take the look of the cardboard ones and just make them look absolutely terrible in comparison, but you can get them in a number of different styles. For me, I went ahead with kind of a bead on the top, and then if you flip it over to the opposite side, it kind of has this almost soft area on the back here, so it ensures that there's no rubbing or damage that's going to happen to your cards or anything like that. But what I really like about these beads, or at least this dome style that I went with, is that it kind of enhances the icon. So for instance, if you have a 5 in there, it really makes it bubble and almost protrude and be even more visual than the cardboard ones were. And that, my friends, is going to conclude this featured product video, taking a look at this one box to rule them all for Lord of the Rings, the LCG from Fantasy Flight Games. The box here designed by Fancy But Functional, and 2 other Etsy creators creating dividers, as well as some fantastic upgraded tokens for the game. Hopefully one, some, or all of these were of interest to you. Let me know in the comments down below which ones you found of the highest interest and you're most intrigued by. If you have any questions around what you saw, let me know as well. Thank you guys for watching, and if you are not part of the Patreon community at Rolling Solo, I definitely recommend that you jump in there, as we have early access videos, polls, behind the scenes photos and videos, lots of things going into 2022 I'm excited to share about. Thank you guys so much for watching, and as always, keep on rolling solo.